بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أبا القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآله
صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه الأخيار المنتجبين. وأما بعد، قال الله تعالى في كتاب المبين: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وكذلك جعلناكم أمة وسطا لتكونوا شهداء على الناس ويكون الرسول عليكم شهيدا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And once again, I want to send my greetings on this auspicious day of the birthday anniversary of Imam Ali alayhi salam to all of you, dear brothers and sisters, and also thank the host of this gathering for taking the opportunity and gathering all of us in his house. May Allah bless him and his family and all of you too. And the verse that I recited says in the English translation, "And so we have made you believers a moderate community." A moderate community. Ummatun wasata. Why? So that you may be witnesses over humanity and that the messenger may be a witness over you. So why is that important? Why have we gathered here, dear brothers and sisters? Why is this gathering so important? What is the purpose and the goal of this gathering? What is the example of the prophets and the Ahlul Bayt alayhum as-salam when it came to establishing a community, when it came to establishing a nation? The word ummah has been mentioned in the Noble Quran approximately 65 times. And Ummatul Wasata has only been mentioned once. But what is the definition of an ummah, of a nation, of a community? When we look at what they say about the definition of a nation, it is that when an ethical group or a geographical location or a language is gathering all the people, or even religion is gathering one people under one flag or within one borders. So geography, language, ethnicity, or religion. That is the definition of an ummah. But what is the meaning when it comes from the perspective of Islam? What is it that Islam wants when they use the word ummah? Islam, when it mentions the word ummah, nation or community, it is only referring to what? To the religious perspective, that we have one common religion. And the Islamic ummah is based upon what? Tawheed. The principles of Tawheed, the principles of faith should be the dominating factor that reigns our country, our nation, or our community. And what does the word wasat mean? It may be very interesting for especially the Arab speakers here that the word wasat means balanced, beauty, great, and honored. And all of these words have the same reality, the same truth. What is that? When you have balance, when you have beauty, that thing is honored, that thing is great. So all of them simultaneously go back to one single reality. But you may ask, moderation for what? Or moderation from what? What is it that makes this community of ours a moderate community? What issues should we have that makes us moderate? In what issues should we be moderate? Number one, excess and slackness, what we call in the Arabic language ifrat wa tafrit. excess and slackness. Moderation in faith, moderation from exaggeration and overstatement, moderation in jabr wa khiyar, the discussion about do we have 100% determination, jabr, or do we have 100% free will? Well, according to the Islam of Ahlul Bayt, we do not concur with that statement. We say that it is amrun bainul amrayn. That is the moderate way. It is in between those two, that there is no 100% free will and there is no 100% jabr or determination. Moderation in materialism, dear brothers and sisters, that we shouldn't drown in materialism and buy ourselves toys and devices and technologies that we do not need. We drown in materialism so much so that we forget spiritualism. Moderation in spiritualism, it's exactly the opposite of materialism. We should not drown in spiritualism either. We should not forget our material issues, the welfare of our family, the welfare of our society, politics, state issues, and so on and so forth. So there should be a moderation, a moderate path to take in between those two. Moderation in science and knowledge. We shouldn't say that we have all the knowledge and the sciences that we need, and we do not need to go towards another direction, towards another nation, borrow from that nation, learn from that community, and so on and so forth. So have moderation even when it comes to knowledge. Be humble. There might be others who know more from you. Moderation in our relationship with others. What do I mean with that? We should not build a fence around ourselves, a wall around ourselves, and not let anyone come near us. And at the same time, we should not take down our guards and allow anyone to come near us and our family and pollute us. Moderation in our culture. We don't want to lose our identity. We don't want to lose our culture. But some things in our own culture, in our own tradition is wrong. We should be able to accept those things that are wrong and take from others. So we have a middle way, the moderate way. Moderation in cultural issues. Moderation in political issues. When we say that we don't want to be the slaves of the West or the East, we don't want to be the followers of the East and the West. We want to have our own identity and build our own technology and be independent. But at the same time, don't forget that not everything that comes from the East or the West is bad and negative. There are some good things to take. The moderate way, dear brothers and sisters. Moderation in our congregation prayers. Salatul Jama'ah. When we have the congregation prayers as the Imam, we should not always recite those chapters, which are small, tiny chapters in the last part of the Quran. We should do and follow the example of the Prophet. His sunnah. What did he recite when he prayed? The Maghrib and Isha and Fajr and so on and so forth. How did he recite it? And the other way around. We should not pray or recite chapters of the Quran which are very, very long. Why? Because the Prophet did not recite so long surahs in Jama'ah, in congregation. The moderate way. Moderation in our daily prayers when it comes to 3 specific times, or should be prayed in 5 specific times. What do I mean with that? We have different denominations, madhahib, in our religion, right? Some of the denominations, they always insist on praying on 3 specific times. The 5 prayers, they pray it in 3 specific times. The exception has become the rule. The rule was that it should be in 5 specific times. And the exception was on 3 specific times. So now we are following the exception. And then you have other denominations. Whatever happens, no matter what, they have to pray 5 specific times. That is also wrong. The Prophet was not traveling when he joined the prayers in Medina. There were some specific causes, reasons that he joined them. But he was not on a traveling foot. And he was not on a journey. So you see, moderation comes back over and over again. Moderation in the specific times we should pray our prayers. Moderation in akhlaq. Moderation in reflection. Moderation in worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes we forget our families. We just pursue our happiness in worship. We just focus all our attention on ibadah. But part of ibadah is to be at the service of your family, what we call irfanul amali. Irfanul amali. When you are at the service of your family, when you are struggling, you're doing jihad when you're going to your work, when you're going 1 hour to this city or that city, and working for your family, the sustenance of your family, that is also jihad. And we should know the moderation in worshipping and work is always the middle way. Then you have others who are workaholics. What about the workaholics? They always work. Never do they spend time on their families. That is also an issue. Moderation, dear brothers and sisters. Moderation in eating, consuming meat, salt, sugar, and so on and so forth. To say it in a nutshell, moderation in everything in our daily life. Moderation in everything in our daily life. Let us see what the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam says in verse 128 to 129 of Baqarah. He says, "Our Lord, make us both fully submit to you, and from our descendants a nation that will submit to you. Our Lord, raise from among them a messenger who would recite to them your revelations, teach them the book and wisdom, and purify them. Indeed, you alone are the Almighty, the All-Wise." What can we receive from these two verses? Number one, submission to Allah. Make us both, me and Ishaq or Ismail, make us both fully submit to you. Taslim, submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two, he says, raise a messenger from this ummah. Raise a messenger from this ummah. A teacher, a master, a mentor, a guide, in other words. For what? To do what? So that he can guide us, that messenger can guide us and by reciting the revelations and teach us the book and wisdom, in other words, knowledge. Purify us. The fifth thing that we can get from these verses. Purify us not only from sins, but also purify us physically, mentally, and spiritually. But who is Allah referring to when He says in that verse that I mentioned, that the nation of Islam, the moderate community, will be bearing witness over others? Who does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention here? There are three different views here according to the scholars of the deen. Number one, me and you, all the individuals in the Islamic ummah, the Islamic nation, the moderate community as the Quran calls it. All of them will be witnesses upon other communities, upon other nations for what? For their a'mal, for their actions, deeds. The second view is that no, not all of them, but the selected group of Muslims, the Salihin, the Mukhlisin, those people will be the witnesses over other communities. The third the third view is that no, it is only specifically referring to the prophets and the Ahlul Bayt. Fahasb. No one else, not the Salihin, not the devotees, not the pious among the Muslims, no. Those who have reached the pinnacle of the Islamic nation, those who have reached the pinnacle of spirituality. Let us go a little bit deeper in the first view. Verse 78 in chapter 22 Al-Hajj says, "It is Allah who named you the ones who submit," Muslim, in the earlier scriptures and in this Quran, so that the messenger may be a witness. Over whom? So that the messenger may be a witness over you, and that you may be witness over humanity. But the question arises here, how can a nation that had presidents, kings, dictators, who were Muslims, they called themselves Muslims, right? Khulafa, and all these presidents that we have today in the Muslim Ummah, many of them were people who mass butchered us for gaining power. They slaughtered people to gain power, worldly power. How can they be witnesses? Thus, we reach to the second view. These people cannot be witnesses over other communities. Then who is it? It has to be the selected, the mukhlisin, the salihin among the Muslims, the pious people among the Muslims. They are the selected ones. They will bear witness over other communities and other nations. It could be the maraja, it could be scholars, and it could be the ordinary layman. But what about the third view, dear brothers and sisters? The verse says, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ وَيَكُونَ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. And so we have made you believers a moderate community, so that you may be witnesses over humanity, and that the messenger may be a witness over you. The narrations from Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam in this regard say, نحن الأمة الوسطى نحن الأمة الوسطى ونحن شهداء الله على خلقه وحججه في أرضه نحن شهداء على الناس إلينا يرجع الغالي وبنا يلحق المقصر. Send the salawat. The translation, we are the moderate community, we the Ahlul Bayt, and we are the witnesses of Allah upon the creation and His evidences on earth. We are the witnesses upon humanity. The exaggerators, al-ghali, have to come back to us for judgment. And the neglectful of our status, of our position, have to leave their shortcomings about us and ultimately come back to us. Are Muslims who didn't follow the practice of the Prophet included in this verse? The answer is no. They are not included. Those who did not follow the Sharia, those who brutally tortured others for gaining power, are not included in this verse. But what about, and this view, the third view, is actually the view of the mystics, the mystic scholars, the urafa of our scholars. But what about the Ahlul Bayt? Did they establish a community? Did they have any such goal in the first place to establish a community, a nation, a society ruled by the principles of faith, usuluddin, and tawheed, monotheism? Or no? What about the prophets? Did they have such a tactic or strategy? Or no? They came only for the sake of some moral values, to give us, me and you, some moral values, some ethical values, and then say, Ma'salama, have a nice day. It's now upon you yourself to build the ideal society. What we can see is that a society ruled by spirituality and the rule of divine law was the example of the prophets. Let us give some couple of examples. Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, this great prophet of ours, he stands up, he refuses to bow down in front of the tyrant of his time. And the city Ur is actually in south of Iraq today. In south of Iraq, that is the origin of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, one of the oldest ancient cities. He refuses to bow down in front of the tyrant. They tried to kill him a couple of times. You know the story. And he also broke down. He broke down what? The idols. He broke down the idols. That is a very, very dangerous move. That is a political move. You broke down the idols. You crushed them with a hammer, with an axe. Thus, we need to do that too. That example should be applied in our life today, and we should break the idols of today. What are the idols of today? We call that ideology modernism. We call that ideology postmodernism. We call that, and everything that is within modernism, like materialism, like skepticism, like individualism, like, what more? Like humanism. All of these ideologies that go against the core of Islam, that goes against Tawheed, the Tawheedi message of Islam, well, we gotta break down those idols. We gotta break down those idols. We have to know the enemy. What about Nabi Musa alayhi salam? Nabi Musa alayhi salam, as soon as he becomes the prophet of Allah, this dear prophet of ours, the Muslims, Nabi Musa, he picks up his stick. The first thing he does, goes towards Fir'aun, the #1 superpower or most powerful person in the world at that time. He goes towards him and he speaks to him, not in a tough manner, not in a rough manner, not in a harsh manner, but he speaks with him with a layyan, with a soft speech. He says, "Let my people go, O Pharaoh. Let my people go. Stop the oppression, and on top of that, come towards Islam. Come towards monotheism." A very dangerous move. It's a political move. What about Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam? This dear prophet of ours had a political position in the society where he became the #2 figure in that country. That is a huge position. And through that, through political movements, he was able to teach the right teachings. He was able to do what is right. A political move. What about Nabi Isa alayhi salam? This holy prophet of ours, Ruhullah, the spirit of Allah, Nabi Isa alayhi salam. As soon as he becomes the Nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does he do? What does he do? He goes against the rabbis in the temple of Jerusalem, Quds al-Sharif. He goes against the rabbis and openly speaks about the financial corruption and the moral corruption they had. The moral corruption they had. That is a political move. They wanted to kill him. They wanted to murder him. What about Nabi Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa
Muhammad.
The messenger of Allah, the holy prophet sallallahu alayhi wa he was a little bit more successful than his predecessors. From the small house, and I want you to listen carefully to this part, from the small house of Darul Arqam, the house of Arqam, this great companion of the Prophet. He started the seed with a couple of people, all right? Like we are doing right now, with a couple of people in a house in Mecca al-Mukarramah. As soon as they became 40, he opened up his proclamation. He openly went to the society in Mecca and openly proclaimed Tawheed, openly proclaimed war against the idols of that time. That is a political move. When you said La ilaha illallah in front of Kaaba, that was a dangerous move. You got yourself killed, like Abu Dhar al-Ghifari rahmatullah alayh, this great companion. He went there a couple of times and he said, La ilaha illallah. There is no God except Allah. So that is a political move. It started in Darul Arqam. the house of Arqam in Mecca, it later on, that seed became the society of Medina. And Yathrib became Madinatul Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Later on, what happened? The whole Arabian Peninsula, Jaziratul Arab, became Muslim. Later on, all the way from Al-Andalus, Islamic Spain and Portugal. And inshallah, if you haven't been there, go, travel. See Al-Hamra in Cordoba, in Granada. See the Mezquita, the mosque, which is a church today, but people still call it Al-Mezquita in Cordoba. See all those buildings that the Muslims built, and the architecture that we have there in Al-Andalus. All the way from Al-Andalus, Islamic Portugal and Spain, to China. That was the community, the Islamic nation. You didn't need a visa to go from one border to another. There was no border. The visa was La ilaha illallah wa Muhammadan Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. What about Imam Ali alayhi salam, Amir al-Mu'mineen? In one of his khutbahs, his speeches in Nahj al-Balagha, and I think you guys know the famous khutbah number 3 of al-Shakhshaghiyya, right? But what about khutbah number 2? In the last part of his khutbah, he says, and people have shown their allegiance, they have done their bay'ah towards Imam Ali. He has become the new Khalifa, all right? And the crowd has come to pay their allegiance to the new Khalifa. And he was the only one, actually, in history who took allegiance from the ordinary layman. People came to him to pay their allegiance. That is an exception among all the Khulafa. And when he became the Khalifa, in khutbah number 2, the last part of the khutbah, he says, Al-Yawm raja al-haq ila sahibihi. Today, al-haq, the truth, has come back to its owner. The Khilafah has come back to its rightful owner. That is a very strong statement. That is a very strong statement. And there are so many examples. What about Imam Hassan alayhi salam? On the battlefield, there were a lot of munafiqeen who did not support him as they supported his father. So he was forced to go underground. He went underground and he continued his jihad underground. An underground movement that started with Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam and continued for 200 years. It continued 200 years, the movement that Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam started. What about Imam Hussein? You know the story. He had to pick up the sword and actually go and sacrifice himself and his family and the progeny of the Prophet. What about Imam Sajjad, the person who is famous for his Sahifatul Sajjadiyya, the Psalms, the Zabur of Islam? What about that? When we recite the supplications, we see that some of them have political messages. It is talking about the dhulm. Why were they afraid about a person who's sitting in his house and writing down supplications, dua after dua after dua? Why would they be afraid of him? But you see that the establishment, the political establishment at that time, were afraid of him. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, when as soon as Bani Umayyah falls down, they descend from power, he goes towards Mecca, and in Mecca he proclaims, Ana al-Haq, come to me. We are those who the Khilafah belong to. We are those rightful owners of the Khilafah, openly, without any fear. But later on, when Bani Abbas got more power, he went towards the underground movement again, towards Taqiyya. What about Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salam? Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salam was living under a very, very difficult time. You had Taqiyya reaching degrees that was unimaginable. We couldn't live in that kind of society. Imagine living in a society where the name of Ali was a political move. So he would come and say things that would shake the Khilafah. You know Harun al-Rashid, right? The most powerful Abbasid Khalifa at that time, the most powerful person in the world at that time. He would come and show huge respect to people who would come to his court, but especially huge respect when it came to Musa ibn Ja'far alayhi salam. When the Imam entered the court of Harun al-Rashid, he would stand up. That is written in the history. Harun al-Rashid, with all his might and glory, would stand up and give his own kursi, his own chair, to Imam Musa ibn Ja'far alayhi salam. And Ma'mun was the witness of all of this. His son, the next Khalifa to come. He was the witness. And he would give, Harun al-Rashid would give huge amounts of gold to anyone who would recite poetry, come with a gift, or translate a book into Arabic, the language which was the universal language of all Muslims at that time, in all the different sciences and fields. And he would give huge amounts for a single poetry, a single sentence. But when Musa ibn Ja'far came, with all that respect that he showed the Imam, he would give a small amount of gold. So Ma'mun was the witness of all of this. He would ask, my father, why are you giving such a small amount to the person that you are showing the most respect to? He said, Ma'mun, this person is an enemy of us. Every gold coin that I give him is an arrow against my own heart. Every gold coin I give him is an arrow against my own heart. That is why I'm giving him that small amount. Imam Musa is a person that I cannot swallow, and I can't throw it out from my mouth. It is a luqma, as we say, a morsel of food that is in my throat, and I can't spit it out, and I can't swallow it. I don't have any proof about his movement against me. That is why, a political move. What about Imam Rida, alayhi salam, Imam Ali Rida? Imam Ali Rida, when he became the Imam, Ma'mun, he thought he was clever, right? Now imagine the most powerful person at our time, right now, for example, a president of a certain country, would give you the position of coming to the house, all right? That house which lies there and has the color of white. And imagine that that person tells you, sit here on the kursi, on the chair, and greet all the different ambassadors, greet all the different personalities that come to me, and you can speak to them. You can speak to them freely. Imam Rida, according to some scholars, jumped on that opportunity. He jumped on that opportunity. He went to Maru, he sat there, and he was able to teach the teachings of Ahlul Bayt, alayhim wassalam. All those teachings, and spread the denomination of the followers of Ahlul Bayt through that political status and position that he had. Some other scholars, the majority, say that no, this was taqiyya. This was taqiyya. He was forced to accept that position. So there are different opinions there. But anyhow, that was a political move. And when he reached Nayshabur, inshallah, if you brothers and sisters haven't been there, go to Nayshabur. It's outside Mashhad. And you see the place, the same place that Imam Ali Rida spoke to the people. And you have in the history that 10,000 people had pens in their hands. Pens in their hands and writing down that hadith, which is called the golden hadith, all right? Or silsilatul dhahabiyya, the golden chain hadith, and where he tells the people in Nayshabur that my father, from my grandfather, all the way to Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali, to the Prophet, and from the Prophet to Jibreel and to Allah, said that La ilaha illallah hisni, right? It is a fort. The one who says La ilaha illallah, he is in a fort, a fortress, is defended from that fort, and is defended from any adab, any pain, any torture, and continues and says that, but there is some shurut, there are some conditions. What are those conditions? And here the history tells us that the Imam sat down from the pulpit, and later on, after 1 minute maybe, after a couple of minutes, I do not know, he stood up and he said, Wa ana min shurutih, right? I am one of those conditions. The Imam is one of those conditions. Again, a political move in front of the Khalifa of the time. And today, because of that approach that the Imams had, and especially the underground movement that Imam Hassan started with, we have followers of the Ahlul Bayt all around the globe. I have spoken with brothers and sisters from Africa, from the heart of Africa, Rwanda. You have followers of Ahlul Bayt. From Nigeria, from third and fourth big cities in Colombia, you have followers of Ahlul Bayt. Norway, Indonesia, all countries, small islands, tiny islands, all right, in the South America, you have followers of Ahlul Bayt because of the revolution that and the approach that the Prophet and the Imams had and started with. So this community starts with a seed and it ends up with followers of the Ahlul Bayt in all around the globe. Now I'm asking you, where do you want to put the standard of this group, of this community, the moderate community? Where do you want to put the standard? Do you want to elevate yourself? Or do you want to be in your own position, your own status? No movement, no progress, nothing. Or you want to elevate this group. You want to elevate yourself. You want to progress yourself from mentally, mentally, spiritually, and physically. Don't forget the physical dimension. Or we just want to mingle here. We just want to say Assalamu alaikum, how are you, and then goodbye. Or no, we want to do more than so. We want to build that seed that was put in the Darul Arqam, the house of Arqam. We want to evolve. We want to progress. For example, if I could give a couple of examples, when it comes to food, what view do we have when it comes to food? Do we want to be in the same position? We don't want to progress when it comes to our physical well-being. We want to buy the same low standard oil, food oil, or no, we want to go higher. We want to eat the same meat, the same chicken, conventional chicken instead of organic chicken. We want to drink the same Coke, or no, we want to go to something that is more healthy for our physical well-being. All of those things are things that we need to reflect upon. What about clothes? The clothes that we wear. Do we have any focus and attention when we buy our clothes and the clothes we wear? Sometimes I see brothers that wear the flag of a certain country that is not so good towards Muslims, all right? And they wear it on their heart. Do we pay attention when we purchase that clothes? Do we pay any attention when we, Walaikum salam, do we pay any attention when we purchase any clothes for our kids? Sometimes I see kids with so-called superheroes, all right? T-shirts with superheroes that are non-existing, they don't exist. But we buy those clothes and we wear those clothes, or we give them to our children. Why do we do that? What is it that you wear? Reflect upon it. What about the goals and the purposes of this community? What goals and purposes do we have? The most crucial and most important goal is to fix our worldview, our mentality about the idols of the time. And I spoke a couple of minutes ago about those idols. Are we in the proximity of Islam, the Islamic worldview? Have you come any meters closer to Islam and the Islamic worldview? Or no, sometimes we see brothers and sisters who are very proud Muslims, right? Very proud Muslims. But when it comes to their mentality, you see that they still have the ideology of modernism. They still have the ideology of individualism, humanism, materialism, and skepticism, relativism. All of those ideologies that is dominant in our society. I'm talking about the Western Hemisphere. I'm talking about the Western world. These ideologies that they taught us in schools and universities. Skepticism, relativism, there is no single truth. You have your truth, I have my truth. And both of us are right. Our children, what about our children? One of the purposes of this goal, of this community, the moderate community, is our children. What activities do we have for our children in a society devoid from sacredness, a society devoid from spirituality? What religious, spiritual activity do we have for our children? Do we have any? They play TV games. They play computer games all day long. Their teachers and athletes, the idols of the time, the athletes of today, the teachers of our children today have tattoos on their bodies. They have, maybe from an Islamic perspective, immoral lifestyle, immoral character. That is our life today. Our children are going to those schools. Do not think that, yeah, Sayyid Wahid, you're the speaker, you have studied so many years about Islam, you have gone to this many countries, yeah, your children will be angels. No. None of us, none of our children are immune from these diseases, psychological diseases. How many have we not seen that have religious parents, but their child has become a non-Muslim, a disbeliever? Tattoos, piercing, you mention it. Another purpose is to get to know each other, dear brothers and sisters. Mingling is important, but it is not all. It is not everything. To mingle, to know each other. لِتَعَارَفُوا, as the verse says, right? So to know each other is very important. We might help each other. We might be able to help each other financially, spiritually, give an advice, give counsel. This community can be the spiritual retreat for some, from all the psychological diseases that we have in our society today. This community, this Darul Arqam, could be the spiritual retreat that that person needs for his life. So this community, in other words, should be a spiritual sanctuary, a haven. And lastly, I would like to thank the host once again. Jazakumullah khairan. And thank you all, dear brothers and sisters. And may you, inshallah ta'ala, be successful. ومن الله التوفيق والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Please send us salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.